I was only 16 years old, and that day seemed to be the same as any other. I was leaving school and walking to the bus stop to get back home. The street was quiet, and I was lost in my own thoughts, distracted. That's when I saw the white van. She was parked there, in the middle of the street, with the engine running, and the man inside her looking at me. He was in his early 40s, older than me, and looked like an ordinary guy. He waved and asked me if I wanted a ride. I hesitated, but he insisted, telling me that he was going the same way, and that it would be faster than waiting for the bus. It seemed harmless, so I decided to accept. I will never forget that moment. Something was wrong, but I didn't know exactly what. When I got into the van, the smell of those vinyl curtains and the leather seat made me uncomfortable, but I didn't want to show it. The man kept talking about the weather and the city, trying to keep the conversation up, but the more he talked, the more tense I got. He couldn't stop looking at me, and that made me restless. That's when I noticed something strange. On the panel, there was a camera filming the inside of the van. My stomach turned. I looked at the floor and saw ropes scattered, piled under the driver's seat, almost as if they were there for someone other than me. At that moment, my heart raced. I knew something was very wrong, but I didn't know how to escape without causing more problems. What would I do? What did he want from me? That feeling of panic took over me. I needed to think fast. Then an idea came to my mind. I pretended I was having a bad time. I put my hand on my forehead and started taking a deep breath, pretending I was going to vomit. The expression on his face changed immediately, but he didn't stop driving. I insisted, squirming on the bench, doing everything to convince the man that I was not well. He looked at me with a nervous expression, but before he could react, he finally stopped the van. As soon as he did that, I ran away like I've never run in my life. I didn't look back, I didn't turn around. I ran to my house, and when I entered, I locked the door with all my strength, unable to breathe properly. To this day, I wonder what would have happened if I had stayed in the van. What would he do with someone so young and vulnerable? What did he want with those cameras and ropes? I never knew, and I'll never know. The worst thing is that, until today, every time I see a white van parked on the street, my heart races. I can only imagine what could have happened, and it's something that will haunt me forever. Has anyone else ever had an experience similar to a ride that seemed harmless, but then turned out to be something much scarier? I've never been very close to my neighbor. She lived alone in the house next door. She was always reserved, almost reclusive. I rarely saw her, and when I saw her, she was coming and going fast, without stopping to talk. Not that it bothered me. He was the kind of person who preferred to keep his distance, and I respected that. But everything changed the day her dog started barking. It was an incessant, loud, and anxious sound. I didn't stop for anything. At first, I thought it was just a phase, something the dog was going through. But the days passed, and the bark did not stop. I tried to ignore it, but there was something uncomfortable in that sound, as if the dog was trying to call for help. After a few days, the situation became unbearable. It was almost as if the dog was going crazy, and my instinct made me think that maybe something was wrong. That's when we decided to act. We gathered some neighbors and went to her house. I knocked on the door, but no one answered. The dog's barking got even louder, as if he was getting more and more desperate. Not knowing what to do, I called the police. They arrived quickly. They had already heard about the dog, and soon they were invading the house. The feeling of discomfort increased every second, as if something was very wrong there. When the police entered the house, the smell of a closed environment for so long spread through the air. They followed the sound of the dog to the basement, and that's where something strange happened. The dog was downstairs, but the scene we found was even more disturbing. They began to investigate more deeply, and, when moving a shelf, they found a secret door. The door was hidden, camouflaged behind furniture, as if it were part of the wall. My stomach turned when I realized that, behind that door, there was a small room. The feeling of claustrophobia took over me when I looked at that tight and lifeless space. Inside the room, there were obvious signs that someone had been kept trapped there. There was no doubt. The walls were marked, and there were clothes, blankets, things that someone could use to survive in such a cramped space. The policemen came in and examined the place. They found old clothes and other personal items that looked like someone who was there for a long time, but there was no sign of life. No clue where my neighbor could be. The strangest thing is that, although it had been weeks since she disappeared, there was no explanation for what had happened. What scares me the most to this day is that, At the same time that the whole scenario seemed to indicate that she was a victim of something terrible, there was something in the way that room was organized that made me think that she could be involved in some way. But to this day, no one knows for sure. She disappeared, and no one could ever explain what happened. If someone here has ever been through something similar, a neighbor disappearing without a trace, what do you think could have happened? I've never paid much attention to coworkers. I worked in an ordinary office with people I saw from Monday to Friday, but I didn't know much about their lives. However, there was a new guy who started working there, Marcos. He was friendly, always gave a smile, and seemed to get along well with everyone. But at the same time, there was something strange about him. I can't explain what, but he had a way of looking at people, as if he was always observing something beyond the surface. Once, while I was browsing an old news site, I came across an article about missing people. I was looking through the list, and suddenly I almost dropped my cell phone. Marcos's face was there, but not with his name, but with another name. The name of a person who has been missing for years. My heart began to beat faster, and I couldn't look away. The most bizarre of all was the date. The article was from about 5 years ago. Marcos was in the photo, but it wasn't him, or at least it wasn't his name. The next morning, something I thought was a coincidence happened. I was in the office kitchen, having a coffee, and decided to comment with him, without much intention of causing discomfort. "Hey Marcos, I was watching a news yesterday about missing people, and you look familiar to me. Have I seen you somewhere before?" He simply smiled, with that enigmatic smile he always wore, and said, "It's possible. I used to be someone else." I tried to ignore that as a joke, but something in the way he said that didn't sound normal. It was as if he was referring to a previous life casually, but I couldn't understand what that meant. The next day, Marcos didn't show up for work. I didn't say anything to anyone, it just disappeared. The people at the company commented that he was behaving strangely last week, but nothing too serious. The strangest thing, however, happened at night. I was at home like any other day when I started to hear weak knocks on the door. I thought it was a friend, so I got up and went to the door. There was no one there, but a few hours later, the beats started again. Now they were stronger. I felt that chill in my spine, something wasn't right. There was no one on the street, nothing that explained the beats. It was as if someone was there, just waiting for me to open it. I never saw Marcos again, and the beats stopped mid as soon as he disappeared. To this day, I wonder what happened to him, how he knew that I had seen the matter, and what it meant. And the most disturbing of all, was he the same person in the photo? Or did he know something about my past too? I'll never know.